SMU at Penn State, first round of the playoffs. It's going down at Beaver Stadium. 12/21, December 21st, going down at noon. This will be our noon game. Last I saw, we have it on the banner here. Penn State 8.5 point favorite. I had it written down at 9, so I'm sure you could probably find a couple different numbers there. Over under set at 53.5 right now. We're about 9 days out from this matchup now. We're going to revisit this thing here on the First and Long College Football Show, and we hope that you will be along for the ride all the way through the playoffs to the national championship, to the offseason, back to spring games again. We never stop here. So if you haven't hit the subscribe button, I hope you'll consider doing it now, because we got your wall-to-wall Power 4 college football coverage and even some teams outside of the Power 4. So we got you covered. We hope you'll come and hang out with us if you're an SMU or Penn State fan, or just a college football fanatic like us. Hit that like button for us real quick as well. Helps the video keep going through the YouTube universe. We would certainly appreciate it, navigating our way through that matrix. SMU, fresh off of the loss in the ACC championship game to Clemson, came roaring back, Mason. I knew SMU had a chance to come back in that second half. I thought it was a slim chance that they would be able to pull off the comeback. They did. They pulled it off. They tied the game up with very little time left in the game and give up a special teams blunder to a guy who's never even returned a kick all year on Clemson's team. And that's how college football works, man. Clemson's able to hit one play from there, kick a field goal, win this thing as time expires, and absolutely crush the hopes of SMU. But fear not, the 12-team college football playoff is here. SMU, your season is still alive. Penn State went through a similar situation, battling back and forth, working their way back into the Big Ten championship game against Oregon multiple times, as Oregon tried to extend their arm and keep Penn State at arm's length. Penn State, I thought, was very impressive in that game. Not quite as impressive as Oregon, but certainly impressive nonetheless, specifically offensively. They were very impressive. So we're going to kind of go through some of the stats today, do our best, do our best educated guess on who we think is going to win this thing. As I said, we're going to revisit this game as we get a little bit closer to game time, but wanted to kind of get our tentacles wrapped around this thing and put our feelers out there, and also hear from you in the comment section. Y'all let us know, what do you think the final score is for this one? I would really love to hear from you guys. Obviously, Vegas feels good about Penn State in this one. Let's kind of look at what SMU was able to do this season. Look, it wasn't a murderer's row of competition, Mason, and we can all put that behind us at this point. That the schedule, what SMU has went through this season, their wins, their losses, all that stuff has been mulled over, over and time again over the last few weeks. SMU's in. Did they play a murderer's row? Have they played a ton of great competition? No, they haven't. And I think that was part of the reason you saw SMU get punched in the mouth early in the game against Clemson. Clemson was able to come out and absolutely, like a battering ram, run through this SMU offense, defensive line. Really, it was the lines of scrimmage where Clemson was flexing their muscles in this one. Once SMU got their feet under them, really at halftime, what was it, 24-7 at halftime, something like that. They're able to get some things going offensively, run their program, which is through the passing game. They can run the ball decently, and they use the running back a ton in the passing game, but it's the passing game that is the real propeller that pushes this whole thing forward for SMU offensively. Kevin Jennings, great running quarterback. He's very, very mobile, good arm, kind of a weird delivery there, but that doesn't really matter at this point in the game. They've got some playmakers that can make some plays down the field. This SMU offense is potent. It is potent, and they can score. They're going to have their work cut out for them against this Penn State defense, though. Defensively, SMU is very good at stopping the run. We saw this defensive line for SMU flex their muscles against Clemson late in that game, and they got some big boys over there at SMU now. Let me just tell you, are they crazy deep? Do they have just a plethora of 300-pounders to throw in the middle of that defense? No, I wouldn't say that. But I was impressed with the physicality of this defensive line for SMU. I was worried about it going into that matchup, and I feel like they proved us right, and they held up to what their ranking was throughout the season. They SMU was really good at stopping the run this season. 93.38 yards per game allowed rushing. That's fourth in the country, and I see why. They've got some dudes on the front of that defense that they're they clog holes, man. They're huge. They're absolutely huge, and they don't get pushed back a whole heck of a lot. They hold their ground, and they allow those linebackers to operate. The passing defense, that is more of a concern for SMU. Now, how does that relate all to Penn State? Penn State, we all saw what they did against Oregon. I mean, 300 yards rushing against Oregon, right? That was an unbelievable performance running the football, and left everybody in the nation, including Oregon fans, wondering, is that our rush defense, or was the rush defense that we saw earlier this year, was that it, or which one here? I mean, it was one of those performances by Penn State's offense where it was like, man, without the turnovers, I mean, Penn State's got a real good shot to win that game. But that's been the issue, right? When this offense has been tasked with being able to throw the football, even in just a couple little situational points throughout the game, they fail those tests, Mason. They don't score points in correlation to the yards that they gain. They did in this past game against Oregon. They scored some points, enough to win, but then the defense, it was another hole in the boat that you got to stick your finger in. The defense couldn't stop Oregon from making explosive plays. So if it ain't one thing, it's the other in these big games for Penn State, and we all know the woes that Penn State and James Franklin have went through in these big games. Let's kind of look at some of the stats. I think a lot of people would be surprised to see the offensive stats for Penn State this season because they're top 3 in the Big Ten in just conceivably every category offensively, right? And as you can see on your screen there, they're top 3rd in the country in just about everything offensively there. So defensively, are you able to slow down that passing attack for SMU? That's going to be the big question in this one. I think SMU's got a little bit of a step on Penn State as far as through the passing game. Penn State's going to have a lot on their mind with trying to contain Kevin Jennings. And if there's been one thing that Penn State has not been great at defensively this season, it's been getting beat over the top, right? We saw it even as far back as against Bowling Green earlier this season. Mason, Bowling Green threw for a lot of yards on this Penn State team. Now, I'm sure they've grown some since then. I like Penn State in this game. I like the matchup. I like it being at home. It's going to be freezing cold. I don't think there's many warm days at Beaver Stadium in December, right around Christmas time. So, going to be a cold one here. Who knows? It could possibly be snowing. I think the elements probably are in the favor of Penn State marginally, a small margin there. Probably give them a couple of points for playing at home here. But it seems to me like the strengths of this game and the strengths in these matchups favor SMU. Mason.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does. I like Penn State, and I like what I saw this past, conference championship, but the strengths of SMU directly match up with the weaknesses of this Penn State team. And so, and then it doesn't work out that way for Penn State. Like offensively, they want to run the football. SMU's good at defending the run. So it's really strength on weakness for SMU in every conceivable category here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I'm not going to say that Penn State's wrongfully favored in this game, right? I think that they're rightfully favored, but it's important to point out that matchup wise, there are some opportunities here for SMU to exploit the matchup. In particular, like you said, SMU's done a great job against the run. Now, have they faced a team that runs the football as well as Penn State does? I would argue to say no, that they haven't. You could say Clemson, but I don't think that Phil Maffa was 100% in the game that they played this past week. I think that's pretty fair to say. I think he's got He's running on E after a long season, running the football 30 times a game, presume or at least that's conceivably what he's been doing all season. But nonetheless, SMU's defense I think is good enough up front to challenge Penn State. I'm concerned about them on the back end, knowing that Penn State has done a better job at passing the football this season. I'm wondering who's gonna match up with Warren. Um, I don't know if SMU has a guy that can really match up with Warren one on one. I think that you're going to have to bracket him, and what does that open up for Penn State? Something should be there, right? Whether it's running back coming out of the backfield or if you've got Perbula in there, does it open up a running lane for Perbula to get some yards with his legs? I'm not sure. Something should be open for Penn State's offense, though, and that's what kind of leads me to think that Penn State will win this football game. But I'm with you, Mark. I like SMU. I think that this is going to be one of those games once again, similar to the Minnesota game, where SMU comes out early with some heavy hitters. They've got a good scripted first drive, good scripted second drive. All of a sudden, they're up like 14-3, and you're thinking, man, is SMU about to pull off this upset? Which they could if everything goes well for the entirety of this game. I just think that Penn State has more dudes that are going to lean on SMU throughout the entirety of the football game. They get the running game going, find some ways to get Tyler Warren involved, and maybe you see a little bit of Bo Pribula as well. And Penn State wins it later in the game. Is kind of the way I see this unfolding. I think that Rhett Lashley will have a few more gray hairs after this one because I do think that SMU is going to be competitive. They're going to be the team is going to come in with a ton of hope in this football game, but playing on the road, playing in an environment that is colder than probably anything that most of these guys have played in throughout their career for most of it. I think that does play a factor here for that team coming up from Texas. But but yeah, ultimately, I like Kevin Jennings a lot. I think that he could be a problem. I mean, on the other side of the football, you think going into this football game, you're going to be watching the running backs, and it's going to be a game that is highlighted by the running backs and what really I would say all three of them do. Speaking about Allen and Singleton for Penn State and Brashard Smith for SMU. I think that it's a given that there's going to be some success in the run game. I think that both teams end up with around 100 yards, 100 to 150 yards on the ground. I like the defenses enough to say that I think that team total wise, those teams are going to be kept under 150 yards. But to me, at that point, it comes down to the quarterback play. What does Kevin Jennings provide, not just with his legs, but with his arms? And does he have the playmakers around him to exploit this Penn State defense? I think I have more certainty in the playmakers for Penn State right now. Really like what Harrison has been doing at wide receiver. I didn't think he was going to play last week, and he ends up going. Was a little bit of a factor, I think, in that football game, considering his status. But and then on top of that, of course, Tyler Warren, who is one of the best playmakers in the playoffs. Because of those two players, really, or the skill players for Penn State as a whole, I'm going to lean with Penn State on this one. Again, not ready to give a score prediction yet. When we do our final preview, we'll give our score predictions and kind of give an official prediction on the game. But right now, I'm leaning Penn State. Again, it's the playmakers for me on the offensive side that get it done for the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I hear you. Right now I'm certainly favoring SMU plus the points in this one, but I think Penn State certainly is the right side of this thing as far as picking, straight up here. We'll revisit this one here in a few days, and we'll have a little bit more in depth stats and things like that. And we hope that you guys will join us for that. Thank you for watching the First and Long College Football Show.